Tonight, before you drift into sleep, I would like to invite you to step aboard a ship floating across the vast expanse of the ocean. There is no sound of engines, no voices from the crew, no signal lights glowing from the windows, only the gentle rhythm of waves brushing against the hull and a thin veil of mist quietly drifting across the moonlit sea. The ship has not sunk. It was not destroyed by a storm. Everything seems to remain untouched. Cups still rest upon the tables. Meals remain unfinished. The ship's logbooks are still open to their final pages, but the people who once lived aboard her have vanished. Without a trace, without an explanation, without a farewell. For centuries, ships like these have appeared across the world's oceans. They are known by a haunting name: ghost ships. Yet what makes ghost ships so fascinating is not that they are connected to spirits or supernatural tales. The true source of their power lies elsewhere. It lies in the void, the space between what happened and what we may never know. Carl Gustav Jung believed that human beings are naturally drawn to unsolved mysteries, for where fact, and sometimes the stories that survive longest in history, are precisely those that never receive an ending. Tonight, we will explore 100 of the most fascinating facts about ghost ships, from the famous disappearance of the Mary Celeste to the legend of the cursed Flying Dutchman, forever wandering the seas. From ships trapped within Arctic ice for decades, to ordinary objects such as a pair of shoes, a letter, or a marine chronometer, each quietly telling moving stories about lives that disappeared upon the ocean. Together, we will journey through history, science, legend, and the deeper landscapes of the human soul. For perhaps every ghost ship is not merely a mystery of the sea. Perhaps it is also a symbol of the unanswered questions that exist within ourselves. If you enjoyed gentle journeys like this, stories that help us relax while reflecting before sleep, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. And now, settle your pillow comfortably, release the tension from your shoulders, and allow the waves of history to carry us out to sea. For somewhere beyond, within the mist of time, the ghost ships are still waiting for their stories to be told. The world of ghost ships. There is an image that has haunted the human imagination for hundreds of years: a ship drifting across the ocean, its sails still full of wind, its hull still intact, its ropes neatly secured, its helm still in place. Yet no one is aboard. Not a single voice, not a single footstep, not a single sign of life. Only the steady sound of waves against the sides of the vessel and the wind passing through aging masts. The ship remains, but the people who once guided her are gone. No explanation, no witnesses, no complete story. And it is from that emptiness that the legend begins. Tonight, as the outside world gradually settles into silence, I invite you to enter one of the strangest corners of maritime history: the world of ghost ships. Ghost ships. In popular culture, when people hear the phrase ghost ship, they often think of supernatural stories, figures appearing within the fog, ships glowing in the darkness, ancient curse, restless spirits unable to move on. Yet the reality of history is far more intriguing. For most famous ghost ships did not begin with ghosts at all. They began with entirely real events. A ship discovered drifting upon the ocean, no crew remaining aboard, no passengers, no one left to tell what happened. Only the ship itself remained, like a silent witness, in the middle of an endless sea. That is perhaps the simplest definition of a ghost ship: a vessel found abandoned, still afloat, but no longer guided by human hands. At first, it may not sound especially frightening, but imagine for a moment. You are a sailor in the 19th century. Your vessel is crossing the Atlantic Ocean. All around you is water, thousands of kilometers from land. Then one morning, a sail appears on the horizon. You move closer. The other ship does not answer your signals. It raises no flag. It offers no response. As the distance closes, something feels wrong. No one stands on deck. No one appears at the windows. there is no movement at all. And when you finally board the vessel, everything remains exactly where it should be. The chairs, the glasses, the clothing, the personal belongings. Yet there are no people. A chill begins to creep into your mind, not because of what you see, but because of what you do not see. Carl Gustav Jung suggested that the human mind is especially sensitive to gaps, to unfinished things, to incomplete stories. When a story lacks a clear ending, our unconscious mind instinctively attempts to fill in the missing pieces. That is why mysteries often survive longer than simple facts. A disappearance without explanation can remain in collective memory longer than thousands of fully explained events. And ghost ships are perhaps the perfect example of this phenomenon. Every ghost ship resembles a novel whose final chapter has been torn away. We know the beginning. We can see the traces left behind. But the ending vanished together with the people who were once there. And so imagination awakens. Theories emerge. Rumors spread. Legends are told. And over time, the boundary between history and myth slowly begins to blur. Perhaps that is what makes ghost ships so captivating. They exist at the meeting point of two worlds. One side is truth. The other is imagination. One side is the ship's logbook. The other is the stories passed from one generation to the next. And sometimes, it is precisely because we do not know what happened that we continue telling the story. Yet if we look deeper, ghost ships are not merely maritime mysteries. They also reflect some of humanity's oldest fears. Fears that existed long before the first sailing vessels ever crossed the sea. The fear of becoming lost. The fear of isolation. The fear of disappearing without a trace. The fear of stepping into the unknown. And perhaps, deep within the unconscious of each of us, the ocean has always been the perfect symbol for these fears. For the sea is vast, dark, unpredictable, and most of what lies beneath its surface remains forever beyond human sight. That is what makes the ocean an image Jung might have particularly appreciated. For within his psychology there exists a symbol carrying a similar meaning. The unconscious, the deep ocean of the soul, a place that contains memories, fears, desires, and unexplored dimensions within every human being. And if the ocean represents the unconscious, then perhaps ghost ships are stories that have risen from those depths, mysteries we are still trying to understand even today. And this is only the beginning of the journey we are about to share. Perhaps this is also why stories of ghost ships have never truly disappeared throughout the centuries. The world has changed. Sails have given way to engines. Brass compasses have been replaced by satellites. Blank spaces on maps have gradually been filled. Human beings have walked upon the moon, sent probes beyond the solar system, connected the planet through cables resting deep beneath the ocean floor. And yet ghost ships continue to appear in books, films, and our imaginations, as though they are reminding us that no matter how far science advances, there will always be stories that remain unfinished, silences that remain unfilled, mysteries that never fully close. There is something deeply human about being drawn toward the unknown. When a story has a beginning but no ending, our minds continue returning to it, like a song that stops before its final note, like a letter interrupted in the middle of a sentence, like a door standing open that no one ever walks through. Ghost ships carry that very feeling. They are like ellipses within history, a space that time itself has never managed to fill. And sometimes, that emptiness is more powerful than any answer. Carl Jung observed that the unconscious does not communicate through logic. It communicates through symbols, through images, through stories. And among humanity's oldest symbols, the sea has always occupied a special place. From the earliest civilizations along the Mediterranean, to the legends of the North, to the ancient epics of Greece, the ocean has often been portrayed as the birthplace of life, yet also as a realm of chaos, a space both alluring and frightening, promising discovery while concealing danger. In Jung's symbolic language, the ocean closely resembles the collective unconscious, a deep world beneath the surface of awareness. a place where humanity's ancient memories are preserved, its primordial fears, its dreams, its images carried across thousands of years. And if the ocean is the unconscious, then ships perhaps represent our conscious minds, fragile, limited, drifting across immense waters, trying to navigate unknown seas. It is a beautiful image, yet there is also a touch of sadness within it. For every human being is undertaking a similar voyage. We live within a world far larger than we understand. We try to find direction, to read the signs around us, to understand ourselves, to understand others, to understand life itself. And sometimes we encounter fog, periods when we do not know where we are going or what awaits beyond the horizon. Perhaps that is why ghost ships resonate with us, not because they are frightening, but because they reflect something deeply familiar, a feeling of being lost, a feeling of loneliness, a feeling of standing before questions that have no answers. In actual history, most ghost ships had remarkably ordinary causes: storms, accidents, disease, war, hunger, human error, decisions made under extreme conditions. Yet what is fascinating is that when the cause disappears together with those who witnessed it, truth gradually gives way to legend. A story is told, then told again, each time gaining another detail, a rumor, a theory, an act of imagination, until history slowly becomes myth. That does not mean people deliberately distort the truth. Sometimes it is simply how the human mind works. We do not like emptiness. We want explanations. We want endings. We want to know what happened. And when answers are absent, imagination enters. That is where ghost ships continue to live, not only in maritime records, not only in archives, but in stories told beside lamplight, in novels, in films, in dreams, and perhaps within some small corner of the collective unconscious that Jung once described. For in the end, ghost ships are not merely abandoned vessels. They are symbols, symbols of the unknown, symbols of loss, symbols of unfinished stories. And above all, they remind us that not every mystery is solved. Not every question receives an answer. Not every voyage ends with a return to harbor. Yet perhaps that is precisely what makes them unforgettable. Like distant stars we will never touch. Like dreams we cannot hold on to once we awaken. Like the sound of waves echoing somewhere offshore tonight. Ghost ships continue drifting through history. And in the next chapter, we will meet the most famous ghost ship ever recorded. A mystery that has endured for more than a century and a half. A story that continues to puzzle the world even today. The story of the Mary Celeste, the ship discovered in the Atlantic Ocean with everything still intact, except for the people who had once been aboard. Mary Celeste, the world's most famous ghost ship mystery. If we were to choose a single vessel to represent the entire world of ghost ships, the first name that would likely come to mind is Mary Celeste. For more than a century and a half, thousands of books, newspaper articles, documentaries, and debates have revolved around this ship. What is remarkable is that the story of Mary Celeste contains none of the elements commonly found in horror legends. No ghosts appearing through the mist, no ancient curse, no mysterious sounds echoing through the darkness of night. On the contrary, everything seems surprisingly ordinary. And it is precisely that ordinariness that makes the story unforgettable. Because sometimes, the things that unsettle us most are not the strange ones, but the things that appear completely normal and yet cannot be explained. Let us return to the winter of 1872. The Atlantic Ocean stretched beneath the cold grey skies of December. Winter winds swept across the sea. Sailing ships continued their long voyages between Europe and America. It was an age when the oceans were still far larger than human understanding. GPS did not exist. Radio had not yet been invented. Once a ship disappeared beyond the horizon, the world had almost no way of knowing what was happening aboard. It was within this setting that Mary Celeste began her final voyage. The ship departed New York in early November of 1872. Her destination was Genoa, Italy. On board was Captain Benjamin Briggs, a man with extensive maritime experience. He was not the reckless or rebellious type often found in adventure stories. Quite the opposite. The surviving records describe him as calm, trustworthy, and highly respected. Traveling with him were his wife, his young daughter, and a carefully selected crew. Every sign suggested that this was simply an ordinary voyage, a commercial journey like thousands of others during the 19th century. And then something unusual happened. On the 4th of December 1872, another ship called the Mary Celeste was discovered drifting in the Atlantic Ocean by a vessel named Dei Gratia. The distance between the two ships was not great, yet the first thing that caught the attention of the sailors aboard Dei Gratia was the way Mary Celeste moved. She did not respond to signals. She did not alter her course. There was no indication that anyone was at the helm. At first, they assumed the crew might simply be resting below deck, but as they watched more closely, a feeling of unease began to grow. Silence. A complete and total silence. Eventually, a boarding party was sent to investigate. When they stepped onto the deck, they discovered a strange scene. The ship was still seaworthy. There were no signs of a struggle, no signs of piracy, no blood, no bodies, no evidence of violence. The cargo hold still contained its cargo. Food supplies remained. Fresh water remained. Essential equipment remained. Even most of the crew's personal belongings were still aboard. But there were no people. Benjamin Briggs had vanished. His wife had vanished. His daughter had vanished. The entire crew had vanished, as though they had simply been erased from the world. Even more puzzling was the absence of the ship's lifeboat. It was gone, as if someone had deliberately left the vessel. But if they had truly abandoned the ship, why? That question has survived for more than 150 years. And it is the reason Mary Celeste became a legend. If the ship had sunk, the story would have ended. If evidence of piracy had been found, the story would have ended. If the wreck and the crew had been discovered, the story would have ended as well. But none of those things happened. Instead, history left behind a void. And that void was large enough for generations to try to fill. Carl Jung observed that the human mind naturally seeks completeness. We want stories to have a beginning, a climax, and an ending. We want causes to lead to effects. We want to understand what happened. We want to find meaning. When meaning cannot be found, the unconscious begins to move. Theories emerge. Stories are retold. Images are imagined. And gradually, a historical event becomes a legend. Mary Celeste is a perfect example of this phenomenon. In reality, what made the case famous was not the number of people who disappeared. Maritime history has witnessed tragedies far greater than this one. What keeps Mary Celeste alive is the fact that it has no definitive answer, or perhaps more accurately, it has too many answers. Each generation proposes a new theory. Some believed in pirates, some believed in sea monsters, some believed in supernatural forces, some suspected an insurance conspiracy, some even suggested extraterrestrials. Yet when historians carefully examined the evidence, most of these sensational explanations slowly collapsed. There were no signs of theft, no signs of violence, no evidence of mutiny, no proof of any attack. And when the dramatic explanations were stripped away, a simpler possibility began to emerge. Perhaps the crew believed the ship was in danger. Perhaps they thought an explosion was imminent. Perhaps they intended only to leave temporarily in the lifeboat. Perhaps they fully expected to return. But then something happened. A powerful gust of wind, a rope snapping, a large wave, a growing distance, and the ship continued onward, while the people who left her disappeared forever. It may not sound especially dramatic, but sometimes the truth wears the shape of small mistakes. Decisions made in a matter of minutes, choices that seemed reasonable at the time, and history changes because of a single moment. Perhaps that is also what makes the story of Mary Celeste so deeply sad, because it reminds us that not every tragedy arrives through grand events. Sometimes they arrive through ordinary things, a misunderstanding, a fear, a decision made amid uncertainty, and then everything disappears beyond the horizon of history. And perhaps it is at this point that the story of Mary Celeste begins to move beyond the boundaries of an ordinary maritime incident. It becomes a mirror reflecting how human beings confront the unknown. For when investigators stepped aboard that vessel in December of 1872, they did not merely discover an abandoned ship, they discovered a question so large that more than a century later, we are still speaking about it. One of the most famous details of the case involves the ship's logbook. A logbook is not a mysterious object. It is simply a tool used to record the daily work of seafarers. Dates, position, weather conditions, the state of the vessel, observations necessary for the voyage. Yet sometimes the most ordinary objects become the most important witnesses of history. The final entry in Mary Celeste's logbook was written approximately 10 days before the ship was discovered. That means that during those 10 days, something happened, something significant enough to cause the entire crew to leave the vessel. Something unusual enough to transform an ordinary voyage into one of the most famous mysteries in the world. Yet strangely, we do not know what it was. Those 10 days are like a locked room. We can see the door. We know that people were once inside, but no one still possesses the key. For decades, historians, sailors, and researchers have attempted to open that door through reason. Today, the theory considered most plausible by many experts involves the cargo Mary Celeste was carrying. The ship transported more than 1,000 barrels of industrial alcohol. It was the kind of cargo capable of producing highly flammable vapors. Several barrels were found to show signs of leakage. This led to a compelling theory. Perhaps Benjamin Briggs or the crew detected the smell of alcohol fumes. Perhaps they heard unusual sounds coming from the cargo hold. Perhaps they feared that an explosion was imminent. Under such circumstances, temporarily leaving the vessel in the lifeboat may have seemed like a reasonable decision, especially for a captain traveling with his family. If you were Benjamin Briggs, and your wife and young daughter were aboard, what would you do if you believed an explosion could occur at any moment? Perhaps you too would choose the safest option, at least in that moment. Modern researchers suggest that the crew may have tied the lifeboat to the ship with a rope and temporarily left to observe the situation. If everything remained stable, they would return. It sounds like a sensible plan, but the sea is not a place where plans always unfold as intended. A strong wind may arise, a rope may break, an unexpected wave may widen the distance, and within only a few brief minutes, the ship and the lifeboat may become separated forever. Mary Celeste continued to float, while the people who once guided her gradually disappeared into the ocean. It is a sad theory, but it is also a deeply human one. There is no need for ghosts, no need for curses, no need for supernatural forces, only a decision made amid uncertainty. Only a few unfortunate minutes, and history was changed. What is fascinating is that this explanation does not diminish the story's appeal. Quite the opposite. It makes the story feel more personal, because all of us have experienced similar moments. Moments when we must make decisions without enough information. Moments when we must choose between uncertain possibilities. Moments when we do not know which path is the right one. Jung once wrote, "Man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health." It was not a celebration of suffering. Rather, it was a reminder that life is always filled with uncertainty. No one can see the entire future. No one can know every consequence of every decision. Benjamin Briggs could not. And perhaps that is what makes this story resonate with us. Not because it is mysterious, but because it is real. Yet Mary Celeste lives not only in history, it also lives within imagination. When newspapers reported the story, The public was immediately captivated. New stories began to emerge. Details were added. Rumors spread. Many people began telling tales of dining tables still set with food, cups of tea still warm, clocks still ticking, signs suggesting that people had vanished only moments before. Interestingly, most of those famous details do not appear in the original investigative records. They were added later by writers, journalists, and storytellers. And that was the moment Mary Celeste crossed the boundary between history and legend. Jung observed that human beings do not live by facts alone. We live through stories. A simple event may be forgotten, but a symbolic story can endure for centuries. Mary Celeste became such a symbol. It was no longer merely a ship. It became the archetype of all ghost ships. Whenever an abandoned vessel is discovered drifting at sea, people remember Mary Celeste. Whenever a new maritime mystery emerges, her name is spoken once again, like a long shadow stretching across the history of the sea. And perhaps this is where Jung's perspective becomes especially fascinating. He believed that certain images possess timeless power, images that appear again and again across different cultures. He called them archetypes, primordial patterns. In a sense, Mary Celeste has become a modern archetype of the unsolved mystery, a door standing open, yet no one knows what lies beyond it, a story that begins but never truly ends, a ship that remains, while the people who once occupied it have vanished. And because there is no ending, the story continues to live. Perhaps if one day we were to discover absolute proof, a new document, a definitive explanation, a truth beyond dispute, Mary Celeste would lose part of its enchantment. Because what keeps it alive is not the answer, but the question. The questions that have never been fully resolved, the empty spaces that imagination continues to fill, the mysteries that make us gaze across the ocean and wonder, what really happened? And as the night grows quieter still, perhaps that is the most beautiful thing this story leaves behind. Not fear, not horror, but wonder. The feeling that the world remains larger than our understanding, that history still contains unfinished pages, and that somewhere beyond the horizon, among the endlessly moving waves, stories still exist that have not yet found their ending. Yet Mary Celeste is only one of many ghost ships that have appeared throughout history. In the next chapter, we will step away from a single mystery and look at a larger question. For the greater mystery is not what happened to Mary Celeste, but rather, why do ghost ships appear? And what truly transforms an ordinary vessel into a legend that survives across generations? Why do ghost ships appear? After hearing the story of Mary Celeste, it is easy to believe that ghost ships are rare, mysterious phenomena that are almost impossible to explain. A ship remains intact, a crew disappears, a mystery survives for more than a century. But if we take a step back and look more broadly at maritime history, an interesting truth begins to emerge. Most ghost ships were not born from curses. They did not emerge from the supernatural world, nor were they the result of mysterious forces. Quite the opposite. Behind many famous ghost ships lie remarkably familiar causes. Causes rooted in human experience. Causes that have existed ever since humanity first ventured out to sea. Storms, fire, war, disease, accidents, fear, and sometimes simply poor decisions. There is a fascinating paradox in history. Ordinary things often create the greatest mysteries. When an unusual event occurs, people tend to pay close attention and document it carefully. But when a series of ordinary events unfolds in an unexpected way, the outcome can sometimes become far more difficult to understand. Ghost ships often emerge in exactly this manner. They are the product of everyday circumstances colliding with some of the harshest conditions on Earth. And that harsh environment is the ocean. To understand why ghost ships appear, we must first understand the sea itself. Today, when we can look at satellite maps on our phones, it is easy to forget that most of human history unfolded amid uncertainty. For sailors of the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, the ocean was not merely a trade route, it was another world, a world where the rules of land no longer applied, a world where the weather could change within hours, where a storm could erase months of preparation, where the horizons stretched endlessly in every direction, where human beings had to accept that they were not truly in control. Perhaps that is why Jung often regarded the ocean as a perfect symbol of the unconscious. He observed that the human mind resembles the sea. The part we can see is only the surface. Beneath it lie far deeper layers, memories, fears, ancient instincts, forces that sometimes operate without our awareness. The ocean humbles human beings. The unconscious does the same, and it is within that environment that the first cause of many ghost ships appears. Storms. If you have ever seen the sea on a beautiful day, it is difficult to imagine how terrifying it can become. But sailors have long understood that the ocean has two faces, one gentle, one fierce. Ocean storms are not like thunderstorms on land. They can last for days. Waves can rise as high as buildings. Winds can tear sails apart. Relentless impacts can shake a vessel without pause. In such circumstances, crews are often forced to make difficult decisions. Sometimes they abandon ship, not because the vessel has already sunk, but because they believe it is about to sink. This is a very important point. Many ghost ships were found still afloat because the people aboard left too early or during a moment of panic. The ship survived, the people did not. It sounds ironic. Yet maritime history is filled with such paradoxes. And then there is fire. Fire is frightening on land. It is even more terrifying at sea, because on the ocean, you cannot simply walk out of a burning building. You cannot call the fire department. You cannot run to safety. You are trapped between water and flame. For centuries, one of the greatest fears of sailors was fire, especially aboard ships carrying oil, alcohol, chemicals, or gunpowder. A single spark could lead to disaster, and sometimes the mere suspicion of a fire hazard was enough for a crew to abandon ship. This is precisely what many researchers believe may have happened aboard Mary Celeste, not because an explosion actually occurred, but because of the fear that it might occur. There is something strangely familiar about this, for many decisions in human life are made in the same way, not in response to what is happening, but in response to what we think might happen. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Fear often operates in the same manner. Sometimes what shapes our actions is not reality itself, but our image of reality. On the ocean, that distinction can determine life or death. Yet storms and fire are only the beginning. For within the history of ghost ships lies another cause, even older, war. For thousands of years, the sea has been more than a place of commerce. It has also been a battlefield. From the warships of ancient Greece, to the vast fleets of great empires, to the submarine campaigns of the 20th century, the oceans have always witnessed conflict. And during wartime, ships are sometimes abandoned, damaged, separated, left adrift. Some are discovered months later, without anyone aboard, without purpose. Nothing remains but the vessel itself, continuing its journey through the power of wind and currents. What is remarkable is that even when the cause is clearly known, the image of an unmanned ship still evokes a special feeling. Perhaps because ships are built to serve human beings. When the people disappear but the ship remains, something feels profoundly wrong. Like seeing a house with lights still glowing inside, yet no one is home. Like hearing music without seeing the musician. Like finding traces of life after life itself has vanished. And that is the feeling ghost ships always leave behind. Yet the sea does not challenge humanity only through storms, fire, and war. Sometimes the greatest danger comes from things so small they cannot even be seen. Disease. Before the rise of modern medicine, voyages lasting months created ideal conditions for illness to spread. One sailor develops a fever. then another, then several more. There are no hospitals, no effective treatments, no way to contact land, only the endless ocean surrounding the ship. For centuries, diseases such as yellow fever, cholera, typhoid, and scurvy haunted sailors. Sometimes, a ship arrived in port with far fewer survivors than when it departed. Sometimes those still healthy were forced to abandon the vessel to save themselves. And sometimes, the ship continued alone, quietly, without a crew, like a ghost upon the sea. There is something deeply sad about such stories. Unlike storms or war, disease does not arrive with thunder or cannon fire. It arrives in silence, one person at a time, one day at a time. Much like many crises in human life, they do not always arrive as a storm. Sometimes they arrive like the tide, slowly, quietly, yet impossible to stop. And then there is another cause, one rooted in human nature itself: mutiny. In popular imagination, sailors are often portrayed as companions, united against the forces of nature. But reality has always been more complex. Long voyage, harsh living conditions, food shortages, exhaustion, homesickness, resentment toward a captain. All of these can accumulate over time, like dark clouds gathering before a storm. And eventually, the tension erupts. A group of sailors seizes control. Some people are left behind. Some are forced to leave. Some disappear from history entirely. When such events occur in the middle of the ocean, discovering the truth afterward becomes nearly impossible. The ship remains, but the story disappears, along with those who witnessed it. Jung observed that human beings carry two parallel forces within themselves: the capacity for cooperation and the capacity for conflict, light and shadow. He called that hidden aspect the shadow, not because it is entirely evil, but because it often remains concealed from consciousness. Upon the vast ocean, where the pressures of life are pushed to their limits, that shadow sometimes emerges more clearly than anywhere else. And then there are pirates, one of the oldest images in maritime history. Yet the reality of piracy is often very different from what films portray. Many pirate attacks did not end in grand battles. Instead, they were brief encounters, quick, efficient, and sometimes leaving very little evidence behind. In some cases, the crew was taken away, the ship was abandoned, the cargo was stolen. But sometimes, because there were no witnesses, the truth became blurred. Years later, all that remained was a drifting vessel. No one knew what had happened, and legend began to form. It is fascinating to realize that many famous ghost ships became legends not because of what happened, but because of what no one saw: the absence, the void, the unanswered questions. Perhaps that is why they captivate us. Not because there is too much information, but because there is too little. The human mind dislikes uncertainty. We want to connect scattered facts into a complete story. We want meaning. We want causes. And when we cannot find them, imagination enters. Yet even without mutiny, disease, or piracy, the ocean still offers countless ways to create a ghost ship: a collision with a reef, a navigational error, a mechanical failure, a miscalculation, a dense fog, a moment of distraction. That is what makes maritime history both astonishing and frightening. Sometimes the boundary between a successful voyage and a disaster is only a few minutes, or a few meters, or a single small decision. These thoughts remind me of one of Jung's famous observations: the least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it. In a certain sense, every ghost ship is the result of countless small details: a gust of wind, a decision, a mistake, a fear. Things that seem insignificant, yet together they alter the entire fate of a vessel. And now we arrive at one of the strangest environments on Earth: the Arctic. If the ordinary ocean is a harsh world, the Arctic feels like a world beyond time itself. There, ice is more than frozen water. It is an archive, a natural time machine. Ships trapped in ice do not always sink. They do not always disappear. Instead, they are preserved, frozen within history. Some vessels have been seen years after they were abandoned. Some seem to refuse to vanish, drifting with the sea ice through remote and empty waters, like ghosts preserved by nature itself. It is one of the most remarkable images in maritime history. An empty ship, trapped among snow and ice. A pale grey sky above, an endless frozen sea below. No sound, no movement, only time itself passing more slowly than it seems to anywhere else on Earth. Perhaps images like these are part of what gives ghost ships their enduring appeal, because they remind us of a very simple truth, that the world does not always operate as we expect, that history does not always leave answers behind, that sometimes the greatest mysteries arise from very ordinary causes. A storm, a fire, a disease, a mistake, a decision made within a few brief minutes. And perhaps that is the most important message of this chapter. Most ghost ships are not born from the supernatural. They are born from very human disasters. But when the people capable of telling the story disappear, the rest is handed over to imagination. And that is where history meets legend. That is where truth meets fear. That is where ordinary ships become ghost ships. In the next chapter, we will leave behind the world of practical explanations and step into one of the most famous legends ever to sail the seas. A ship said to be cursed to wander forever. A name that has lived within humanity's imagination for centuries. The Flying Dutchman. The legendary ghost ship of the ocean. Flying Dutchman. The legendary ghost ship. If Mary Celeste is the most famous mystery in the history of real maritime events, then the Flying Dutchman is perhaps the most famous ghost ship in the imagination of humanity. For more than 300 years, that name has drifted through countless generations of sailors. It has appeared in stories told beside the glow of oil lamps, in taverns along the waterfront, in novels, in symphonies, in paintings veiled with sea mist, and in the dreams of those who have gazed toward distant horizons. What is remarkable is that no one knows exactly where the Flying Dutchman truly began. There is no clear birth date, no official maritime record confirming its existence, no fully documented first witness. Like many ancient legends, it seems to have emerged from the ocean itself, growing larger with every retelling, growing stronger with every generation, until it became an immortal symbol of the sea. According to the most widely known version of the legend, the Flying Dutchman was a Dutch ship attempting to round the Cape of Good Hope during a violent storm. The wind howled, the waves rose like cliffs, the sky darkened beneath heavy storm clouds. Under such circumstances, the ship should have turned back or sought shelter, but the captain refused. He was determined to continue. Some versions say that he swore he would round the Cape even if it took until Judgment Day. Others claim that he defied God himself. Though the details differ, every version arrives at the same ending. The ship was cursed, never allowed to make port, never allowed to return home, condemned to wander the seas forever. If we listen carefully, we begin to realize that this is not merely a story about the ocean, it is a story about human beings. For long before sailing ships existed, people were already telling similar tales. Stories of those who became lost, of travelers who could never return home, of souls wandering between two worlds. In the psychology of Carl Jung, such images often appear in the form of archetypes. Archetypes, ancient symbols shared by all humanity. The Flying Dutchman carries within it the archetype of the eternal wanderer, a figure that appears across countless cultures, a traveler trapped within an endless journey, unable to move forward, unable to turn back, unable to find a final harbor. There is something deeply sad about that image, and something profoundly human, for at times, we too experience similar journeys in our own lives, not upon the sea, but within the soul, periods when we feel lost, Moments when we do not know where we are going, when we do not know what awaits us ahead, when we do not know when the journey will finally end. Perhaps that is why the Flying Dutchman endures. Not because of the ship itself, but because of the symbol. Every great myth touches something within us, something deeper than reason, deeper than history, deeper than evidence. And then there is the sea. If there is one place suited to giving birth to legends such as the Flying Dutchman, it is the ocean itself. For centuries, the sea was a realm humanity understood very little about. A vast world, unpredictable, almost impossible to control. Storms emerged from nowhere. Fog swallowed entire horizons. Dark nights became so complete that sailors could no longer distinguish sea from sky. Under such conditions, imagination became a sailor's companion, but at times, it also became the source of fear. A distant light upon the water, a dark shape in the mist, a ship appearing and then vanishing. Any of these could become part of a legend. Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This is one of his most famous observations, and it becomes especially interesting when applied to the Flying Dutchman, for perhaps that ghostly vessel never truly existed in the way the legend describes. Yet the fear it represents is entirely real. The fear of becoming lost, the fear of never returning home, the fear of confronting forces greater than ourselves. When a sailor sees the Flying Dutchman in folklore, what he may truly be seeing is not a ship at all, but the reflection of his own fears. That is something Jung emphasized throughout his work. The most powerful symbols rarely come from the outside world. They come from within. They are the language of the unconscious. And perhaps the Flying Dutchman is one of the most powerful symbols the ocean has ever created. Yet this legend carries another meaning as well, a meaning that helped it survive throughout maritime culture. It is a story about pride. In nearly every version of the legend, the captain of the Flying Dutchman shares one defining characteristic. He refuses to listen, refuses to turn back, refuses to accept his limitations. He believes that human willpower can overcome everything, even nature, even storms, even fate itself. And it is precisely this belief that leads to the curse. This is a theme that appears repeatedly throughout human history, from Greek mythology to European folklore to modern tragedies. Human beings often encounter danger when they forget humility before forces greater than themselves. The sea is one of those forces, and the Flying Dutchman becomes a symbolic reminder that some powers cannot be conquered through determination alone, that sometimes wisdom does not lie in pushing forward, but in knowing when to stop, knowing when to turn around, knowing when to listen to the wind as it changes direction. And perhaps that is a lesson for all of us, not only at sea, but in our own lives. And over time, the Flying Dutchman became more than the story of a cursed captain. It became a sign, an omen, an image no sailor hoped ever to witness. In countless versions told over the centuries, the Flying Dutchman appears during extraordinary moments. In the middle of a storm, within dense fog, beneath the strange light of sunset or moonlit skies, the ship is often described as glowing, sometimes with sails red as blood, sometimes surrounded by a pale blue light, sometimes appearing for only a few moments before vanishing. And almost always, its appearance is believed to foretell disaster, a storm, a shipwreck, a death, or a voyage that will never end. To modern minds, this may sound like superstition, but if we place ourselves in the position of sailors living 3 or 4 centuries ago, the feeling becomes far easier to understand. Imagine yourself in the South Atlantic. Darkness surrounds you. Your small ship trembles beneath the force of wind and waves. There are no weather forecasts, no radar, no distress signals, no technology capable of helping you see beyond a few hundred meters through the rain. Under such conditions, the world would seem far larger and far more mysterious than it does today. Every cloud might carry danger. Every strange light on the horizon might cause your heart to beat a little faster. And when fear appears, imagination begins to work. Jung observed that human beings do not respond only to reality itself. We respond to the meaning we assign to reality. Two people may witness the exact same phenomenon, yet experience it in completely different ways. One sees fog, another sees an omen. One sees reflected light, another sees the spirit of a cursed ship. That does not necessarily mean one person is right and the other is wrong. It simply reveals that the outer world is always filtered through the inner world, and perhaps the Flying Dutchman is the perfect example of this process. For the deeper historians investigate, the more they realize that many sightings of the Flying Dutchman can be explained through natural phenomena. One of these is the phenomenon known as fata morgana, a rare optical mirage that occurs at sea. When layers of air have different temperatures, light bends in unusual ways. Ships far beyond the horizon may appear to float above the water, stretching, distorting, or even appearing upside down in the sky. For an 18th century sailor, such a sight would have seemed impossible. A ship appearing from nowhere, blurred, unnatural, unlike any ordinary vessel, and then disappearing again. Today, we call it the refraction of light. But centuries ago, people called it the Flying Dutchman. What is fascinating is that the scientific explanation does not diminish the beauty of the legend. Quite the opposite. It makes the legend feel more human, because now we understand that the Flying Dutchman is not simply a story about a ship. It is a story about how human beings experience mystery, how the mind confronts the unexplained, how fear and imagination work together to create symbols. In Jungian psychology, there is a concept of profound importance: the shadow. It is the part of the soul we do not wish to see. Hidden fears, insecurities, repressed emotions, unacknowledged truths. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the part that has not yet been fully recognized. And sometimes, what frightens us most in the outside world is actually a reflection of the shadow within. The Flying Dutchman can be understood in exactly this way. That ghost ship does not merely appear upon the sea. It appears within the mind. It embodies the fear of becoming lost, the fear of failure, the fear that one day we may travel too far and be unable to return. These are ancient fears, human fears, and that is why they still hold power today. Perhaps that is why this legend has never truly died. Even after the age of sailing ships has passed, even after satellites filled the skies, even after humanity gained the ability to see nearly every corner of the planet from space, the Flying Dutchman remains, not upon the ocean, but within culture, within art, within cinema, within the stories told before sleep, because it has become part of the collective unconscious. Jung used the term collective unconscious to describe the shared reservoir of symbols carried by humanity. These symbols belong to no single individual. They live within stories, dreams, legends, and the Flying Dutchman is one of those symbols. A reminder that human beings always stand before forces greater than themselves. Nature, time, fate, and the unexplored oceans within the soul itself. Perhaps that is the deepest meaning of this legend. Not that a ghost ship is wandering somewhere across the sea, but that each of us has experienced journeys without knowing the destination. Periods filled with fog, inner storms, moments of feeling lost. And in those moments, the Flying Dutchman becomes a mirror, a symbol of fear, but also a symbol of persistence. For whether cursed or not, the ship continues moving, continues crossing the waves, continues existing upon the horizon of human imagination. And as the night sea grows quieter, perhaps we can view this legend through a different lens, not as a horror story, but as an ancient lesson about humility, about human limitations, about the things we cannot control, and about the strange power of symbols that live forever within the human soul. Yet the Flying Dutchman is only a legend. In the next chapter, we will return to real ghost ships, ships discovered adrift upon the ocean, with traces that send chills through the spine. Meals left unfinished. Chairs still standing exactly where they belonged. Personal belongings untouched, as though the people aboard had departed only minutes earlier. And that is where the mystery begins to feel closer than ever before. Ghost ships, with traces of life. Of all the things that make ghost ships so mysterious, perhaps the strangest is not the absence of people, but the presence of everything else. If we step aboard a ship that sank long ago, we know we are facing the past. If we see a wreck resting on the ocean floor, we understand that the story has ended. But ghost ships are different. They do not feel like stories that have ended. They feel like stories that have been interrupted, as though someone were writing a letter and suddenly stood up before finishing it. As though a piece of music stopped in the middle of a melody. As though time itself suddenly ceased to move. In many famous cases, the first people to board a ghost ship described the same feeling. Not fear, but confusion. A feeling difficult to name, because everything seemed to still contain life, and yet that life was no longer there. Imagine a quiet afternoon upon the ocean. A drifting ship is discovered. It does not respond to signals. No one stands on deck. A group of sailors boards to investigate. They open the door to the living quarters, and the first thing they see is a dining table. The plates are still arranged neatly in place. The chairs remain pulled out. Perhaps there is a cup of coffee long since gone cold. Perhaps a loaf of bread remains half-eaten. There are no signs of chaos, no signs of panic. Only the feeling that the people who once sat there had left just a few moments before. This is one of the images that appears again and again in stories of ghost ships. An unfinished meal, a very small detail, yet one with extraordinary power over the human imagination. Because a meal is a symbol of everyday life, it represents normality, safety, continuity. When we see an unfinished meal, our minds automatically begin imagining the people who once sat around that table. What were they talking about? What were they thinking? What happened only minutes later? Those questions arise almost instantly, and that is precisely what gives the image its power. Not because of what we see, but because of what we do not see. Carl Jung spent many years studying how the mind responds to absence. He realized that human beings are not attracted only to answers. We are also attracted to questions, especially questions without solutions. When a story remains unfinished, the unconscious attempts to complete it. We begin to imagine. We begin connecting fragments. We begin constructing possible versions of what might have happened. And it is that process that allows ghost ships to live on in our minds. If a ship were completely empty, it might make us curious. But if traces of life still remain aboard, the feeling becomes entirely different. It becomes more intimate, more human, and therefore more haunting. Beyond unfinished meals, another detail appears frequently: personal belongings. A coat hanging on a hook, a pair of shoes beside a bed, a book left open halfway through, a comb resting on a table, a family photograph tucked away in a drawer. These objects hold little material value, yet they possess extraordinary emotional value, because they remind us that the missing people were not characters from a legend. They were real human beings. They had families, habits, ordinary days, plans for the future. Jung once wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." A simple yet profound observation. Every individual is a world unto themselves. And when we see personal possessions left behind, we instinctively sense that world, a world that vanished without warning. That is what makes ghost ships different from other mysteries. They do not merely raise questions about what happened. They remind us of lives interrupted, stories left unfinished, dreams that never had the chance to be completed. Perhaps that is why small objects sometimes create a stronger emotional impact than grand pieces of evidence. A forgotten watch, a hat, an unsent letter, all of them feel like echoes of people who are no longer there. Yet the story becomes stranger still, because in many cases, when the people disappear, other living creatures remain. Cats, dogs, birds. or animals carried aboard the ship. Imagine stepping onto a completely abandoned vessel, then suddenly seeing a cat emerge from the end of a corridor, or hearing the footsteps of a dog somewhere on the deck. Their presence creates a remarkably strange feeling. On one hand, they are signs of life. On the other, they emphasize the absence of human beings, as though the world itself has continued. But the people who once cared for them have vanished. It is a curious paradox, one that often feels more unsettling than complete emptiness, because life remains, but the owners of that life do not. And it is in moments like these that a ghost ship becomes something more than a maritime mystery. It becomes a psychological experience, a confrontation with the fragility of existence, a reminder that the boundary between presence and disappearance is often far thinner than we imagine. Yet perhaps the strangest thing about many ghost ship stories is not the untouched dining tables, not the shoes beside the bed, not the surviving animals, but the signals, the sounds, the signs that suggest the ship is still functioning. In several famous cases during the 20th century, ships were discovered while their electrical systems were still operating. The lights remained on, machinery continued running, radios were still capable of transmitting signals. These are especially strange moments, because radio was created to connect people. It is a voice that travels across distance, a tool designed to resist the loneliness of the sea. Yet aboard ghost ships, the radio sometimes remains even after the people meant to use it have disappeared. Imagine that scene. You enter the communications room. No one is there. The chair is empty. The headset still rests upon the desk. The equipment continues to glow faintly. Perhaps a weak burst of static still crackles through the silence. A very small sound, yet enough to make one feel as though some trace of human presence still lingers. Not quite a real presence, but the shadow of a presence. And sometimes, that shadow feels more haunting than the people themselves. In modern psychology, there is a fascinating concept known as the uncanny. It is often described as the strange feeling that emerges from something familiar, a state in which we encounter something perfectly ordinary, yet something feels subtly wrong. An ordinary house, but completely empty. A familiar room, but frozen in unnatural stillness. A face that looks almost human, yet missing something impossible to define. And it is that small difference that creates unease. Ghost ships are perhaps the perfect embodiment of the uncanny, because everything aboard them appears so ordinary. The table, the chair, the radio, the bed, the objects of everyday life. Nothing about them is frightening. What makes them strange is the absence of the people who should be there, like a stage prepared for a performance. But the actors never arrive, like a song whose instruments remain, but whose musicians have vanished. It is that absence that creates the psychological power of ghost ships. Carl Jung was deeply interested in what remains after an experience has ended. He believed that memories do not exist only within the mind. They also cling to symbols, images, objects. That is why an old possession can sometimes awaken stronger emotions than a long story. A forgotten watch can make us think of the person who once wore it. An unfinished book can make us imagine the person who once read it. An empty chair can make us feel absence more vividly than any explanation ever could. On ghost ships, every object becomes a storyteller, not through words, but through its silent presence. A cup resting upon a table, a card game left unfinished, a journal opened to its final page. These things do not provide answers, but they awaken imagination. And sometimes imagination is more powerful than truth. There is something fascinating about human nature. When we see an empty room, we rarely focus on the room itself. We think about the person who once occupied it. When we see a ghost ship, we do exactly the same thing. We do not see wood, steel, or rope. We see lives, stories, conversations that once took place, dreams that were once nurtured upon the deck, people who stood there watching the sunrise, people who missed home, who hoped, who worried. who laughed, who lived. Perhaps that is why ghost ships touch us so deeply. They are not merely mysteries. They are reminders that every object is connected to a human being, that every trace once belonged to a life, and that the disappearance of a person always leaves behind a space that no object can truly fill. Jung once wrote, "In all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." When we look at a ghost ship, we often see only mystery. But perhaps beneath that mystery, there still exists a complete story. A chain of causes and effects. A hidden order that once made perfect sense. We simply no longer possess enough pieces to see it. Life is much the same. There are events we do not understand. Partings that arrive without explanation. Chapters that end far too suddenly. Yet that does not mean they are meaningless. Sometimes, we are simply standing in a place from which the entire picture cannot yet be seen. And perhaps that is why ghost ships continue to captivate us. Not because they tell us about death, but because they tell us about presence, about the traces human beings leave behind, about the way life continues to echo even after the people who created it have disappeared. A radio still transmitting signals, a cat still wandering the deck, a book still open to its final page. All these things feel like small echoes from the past, whispers from a story that was never fully told. And as the night grows deeper, perhaps that is the most beautiful thing ghost ships leave behind. Not terror, not ghosts, but the feeling that every life leaves traces, that even when people disappear, the things they touched continue telling their story. And yet the sea creates an even stranger phenomenon. There are ships that were not merely abandoned, not merely filled with traces of life, but vessels that continued their journeys on their own, without a crew, without a destination, without a purpose. They wandered across the oceans for months, sometimes for years, as though the sea itself had become their final captain. And that will be the story of our next chapter. The ghost ships that wandered endlessly across the world's oceans. Ghost ships wandering across the oceans. There is something strange about ghost ships that we rarely stop to consider. They do not stop, even when there are no sailors left, no captain, no one standing at the helm. They continue their journey, quietly, patiently, slowly drifting across the vast oceans of the world. If a ship is a symbol of human will, then what happens when the humans disappear? Our intuition usually tells us that everything should come to an end, but the sea offers a different answer. For upon the ocean, ending and continuing are sometimes separated by nothing more than a single wave. An abandoned ship does not necessarily sink. It may remain afloat for weeks, for months, sometimes for years. No one steering it, no one guiding it. Yet it continues to move, driven by invisible forces. Wind, ocean currents, waves. These silent powers become its new crew, and the ocean becomes its final captain. It is a beautiful image, and a sad one. An empty ship, drifting across the water, continuing toward the horizon without any knowledge of its destination. Perhaps that is why wandering ghost ships create such a unique feeling. They are not merely forgotten objects. They resemble lives that continue even after their stories have ended. Carl Jung spent much of his life reflecting upon journeys without maps, periods in which human beings no longer know exactly where they are going. Throughout his writings, he often returned to the image of drifting, not in a physical sense, but in a psychological one. Moments when the ego loses its direction, when old plans no longer function, when familiar roads disappear into the fog. And it is fascinating to realize that many ghost ships experience a remarkably similar journey. After being abandoned, they no longer have a destination, no route, no orders. Yet, they continue moving, just as life continues, even when we do not fully understand where it is leading us. Throughout maritime history, there have been cases that left researchers astonished. A ship abandoned in the North Atlantic. Months later, it appears near the coast of Europe, a vessel lost in icy waters, then unexpectedly discovered thousands of kilometers away. Some of these journeys became longer than the voyages the ships were originally built to undertake. At first, this sounds almost impossible. But when we examine maps of the world's ocean currents, we begin to understand what is happening. The ocean is never truly still. Its surface is constantly in motion. Immense rivers of water silently circle the planet. They transport heat, they influence climate, and sometimes they carry abandoned ships with them. From the perspective of someone standing on land, the ocean appears chaotic. But beneath that apparent chaos lies an astonishing order. Jung once wrote, "In all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." The sentence feels as though it were written especially for the sea. The waves seem random, the winds seem unpredictable, yet when viewed on a larger scale, they form stable systems that endure for centuries. And it is those systems that guide ghost ships, not through intention, not through purpose, but through natural laws deeper than any sailor could ever control. Perhaps this is one reason ghost ship stories resonate so deeply with us, because they reflect something all of us have experienced, the feeling that we are not entirely in command of our own journey. We make plans, set goals, chart course, and then life introduces its own currents. Unexpected encounters, losses, changes, opportunities, upheavals. And sometimes they carry us toward places we never intended to visit. A ghost ship carried away by ocean currents. A human being carried away by time. Perhaps those two images are not as different as they first appear. Some journeys begin with a clear destination, yet end somewhere completely unexpected. And some journeys seem finished, yet continue in another form. That is what makes ghost ships feel so familiar. They do not merely tell stories about the sea, they tell stories about life, about continuing forward even when we are no longer certain of our direction, about being guided by forces greater than ourselves, about existing within uncertainty, and perhaps somewhere deep within the unconscious, we understand that feeling better than we realize. For each of us has known moments when we felt like a ship drifting through fog, not knowing exactly what lies ahead, yet continuing to move, continuing to live, continuing toward a horizon we cannot yet see. And as we study maritime history, we discover that some ghost ships undertook journeys that seem almost unimaginable. Not through the skill of master sailors, not through modern navigation systems, but through the quiet forces of nature, wind, waves, currents. Those invisible powers transformed many abandoned ships into unwilling travelers of the sea. One of the most famous examples is the Bichimo. This small cargo vessel became trapped in Arctic sea ice in 1931. After numerous failed rescue attempts, the crew was eventually forced to abandon her. According to ordinary logic, the story should have ended there, but it did not. For years afterward, the Bichimo continued to be sighted in various parts of the Arctic Ocean. Hunters, fishing crews, explorers. Many reported seeing the empty vessel drifting among fields of ice, as though it refused to disappear from history, as though the sea itself was unwilling to close its story. There is something profoundly poetic about that image. A ship forgotten by the world, yet continuing to exist, continuing to drift, continuing to be present, like a memory that refuses to fade. And the Bichimo was not the only example. Throughout history, many ghost ships have been discovered thousands of kilometers from the last locations where they were recorded. Some crossed multiple seas. Some were carried by vast gyres of circulating currents. Some seemed to undertake journeys longer than the voyages they had originally been built to complete. This realization teaches us something remarkable. When human beings leave the stage, nature does not stop performing. The ship loses its crew, yet the ocean continues to guide it. Perhaps this is one of the deepest lessons ghost ships offer us. They remind us that the world does not revolve around humanity. The oceans existed for billions of years before the first sail ever touched the wind. The currents flowed long before the first map was drawn, and they will continue flowing long after the final ship has vanished. From Jung's perspective, this idea becomes especially fascinating. He often spoke about the deeper forces operating beneath consciousness. Invisible impulses, ancient patterns, psychological currents that shape our lives without our awareness. If consciousness is like a captain standing upon the deck, then the unconscious is like the ocean below, faster, more powerful, and far older. Sometimes we believe we are steering our lives. Then an unexpected event occurs. A chance encounter, a loss, a transformation, and suddenly we realize that invisible currents have been quietly shaping our course all along. Jung once wrote, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong." Ghost ships are much the same. At first glance, an empty vessel drifting thousands of kilometers appears meaningless, random, without purpose. But when we look more closely, patterns begin to emerge. Ocean currents, seasonal winds, the immense structures of nature operating silently beneath the surface. And the same is true of life. Many events that seem random eventually reveal themselves as parts of a larger story. A chance meeting that changes an entire life. A small decision that opens a new path. A loss that leads to growth. Only in retrospect do we recognize the currents that carried us to where we are today. Perhaps that is why the image of ghost ships wandering across the oceans touches something so deep within the human soul. Because they represent a universal experience. The feeling of drifting. The feeling of uncertainty. The feeling of moving without fully knowing the destination. Yet at the same time, they carry a gentler message. That not every journey must be controlled completely. That sometimes continuing to exist is itself a form of progress. That there are seasons of life when the only thing we can do is trust the current. Trust that we are still going somewhere, even if we cannot yet see the shore. As night settles over the ocean, ghost ships seem to become perfect symbols of this truth. Without a pilot, without a clear destination, yet still moving beneath the stars. Still crossing storms and waves. Still writing new chapters in their stories. Perhaps that is why they move us so deeply. Not because they have been abandoned, but because they continue to exist, continue to drift through a world far larger than themselves. And when we speak of ships that were abandoned yet somehow endured through the years, nowhere is stranger than the Arctic, a land of ice, fog, silence, a place where ships do not always sink beneath the sea. Instead, they are held by time itself, frozen within history like artifacts from a vanished world. And that will be the next stop on our journey, the ghost ships of the Arctic, where ice and snow become the ocean's own time machine. Arctic ghost ships. If the ocean is a vast library of human history, then the Arctic is perhaps its most secret archive, a place of cold, silence, distance, and a place that seems to exist outside the ordinary flow of time. In the previous chapters, we encountered ghost ships wandering across the world's oceans. They were pushed by the wind, carried by the waves, guided by silent currents. But in the Arctic, the fate of ghost ships is different. This place does not merely preserve ships. It preserves history itself. It preserves unfinished stories. It preserves moments that, anywhere else on Earth, might have been erased by time long ago. Perhaps that is what gives the Arctic its strange beauty. A beauty that is both magnificent and lonely. When we look at a map of the world, the Arctic appears as little more than a white expanse at the top of the globe. But for explorers of the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was one of the most mysterious places on the planet. A land of fog, ice, endless nights, and immense spaces bearing almost no trace of humanity. For centuries, sailors attempted to conquer it. They hoped to discover a shorter route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. They hoped to open new commercial pathways. They hoped to carve their names into history. Yet the Arctic often answered those ambitions with silence. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble." Perhaps nowhere illustrates that observation more clearly than the Arctic. For this region has long become a symbol of unanswered questions, unfinished journeys, mysteries stretching across generations. And among them, one name stands apart: Bichimo, the ghost ship of the ice. The story of the Bichimo began in 1931. She was a cargo vessel belonging to the Hudson's Bay Company, an ordinary ship, not famous, not mysterious. No one imagined she would become part of history. Then the Arctic winter arrived. Sea ice thickened. Massive fields of ice began trapping the vessel. At first, the crew hoped they could free her. They waited. They searched for solutions. But the ice refused to release its grip. Eventually, the ship was abandoned. A perfectly reasonable decision, for under such conditions, human lives mattered more than any vessel. Yet something remarkable happened afterward. The Bichimo did not sink. She did not shatter within the ice. She did not disappear. Instead, she continued to appear, year after year, decade after decade. Many people reported seeing the vessel drifting among the frozen waters, a lonely silhouette against an endless white horizon. No sailors, no smoke rising from her funnel, no signs of life, yet still present, as though time itself had forgotten her, as though she existed in a space suspended between past and present. There is something deeply Jungian about that image, for Jung believed that certain memories never truly vanish. They simply sink into deeper layers, waiting quietly, continuing to exist beneath the surface of consciousness. The Bichimo resembles such a memory, a story that should have ended, yet continues to reappear, continues drifting through history, continues reminding us of things left unresolved. But if the Bichimo is the ghost of endurance, then HMS Resolute is a story of redemption. Commissioned during the middle of the 19th century, Resolute formed part of the search efforts for the lost Franklin expedition. Like many Arctic ships, she became trapped in ice. Eventually, she was abandoned. The story seemed finished. Yet nature had another chapter to write. For months afterward, Resolute drifted with the Arctic ice, until she was discovered by an American whaling vessel. The ship was brought home, repaired, and eventually returned to Britain as a gesture of goodwill between two nations. What makes the story extraordinary is that it did not end there. Years later, after Resolute was retired from service, part of her timber was used to create the famous desk that stands in the Oval Office of the President of the United States, the Resolute Desk, one of the most recognizable symbols of American government. Pause for a moment and consider that journey. A ship once abandoned amid the frozen Arctic, once drifting without purpose, once considered lost, eventually became a symbol of diplomacy and international cooperation. It is a remarkable voyage, and a beautiful reminder that not every unfinished story ends in tragedy. Sometimes it is simply waiting for a new chapter to be written, and then we arrive at perhaps the greatest mystery in Arctic history. A story that continues to captivate historians, archaeologists, and lovers of maritime history to this day. The Franklin Expedition, a name that has become legendary. In 1845, two ships named HMS Erebus and HMS Terror departed from England on an ambitious mission. The expedition was commanded by Sir John Franklin, an experienced naval officer, a man in whom an entire nation placed its hopes. Their goal was to discover the Northwest Passage, a sea route believed to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Arctic. Today, when we look at satellite maps, such an objective seems far more attainable. But in the middle of the 19th century, it was almost the edge of the known world, a vast blank space upon the map, a gap in humanity's understanding, a doorway into the unknown. And like many great journeys in history, it began with hope. The ships were among the most advanced of their era. The crews were carefully selected. Supplies were stocked for years. Everyone believed they were advancing toward a triumph of science and exploration. And then the expedition vanished. No letters, no signals, no ships returned. Only silence. Years passed. Search expeditions followed one after another. New voyages set out. Rumors spread. Fragments of evidence emerged, yet the larger picture remained hidden beneath the ice. And that was when the Franklin expedition began crossing from history into legend. Because human beings struggle to accept stories without endings. We want to know what happened. We want to understand why. We want to find closure for unfinished narratives. But the Arctic does not surrender answers easily. For decades, only scattered traces were found. A handful of artifacts, a few graves, fragments of Inuit testimony. Each discovery was like a puzzle piece, yet no one could see the complete picture. This brings to mind one of Jung's most important ideas. He believed that much of psychological life exists not in what we know, but in what remains hidden, like an iceberg. The portion visible above the water is only a small fraction. Most of its mass lies beneath, hidden, silent, difficult to reach. The Franklin expedition is much the same. For more than a century, humanity saw only the visible portion. Most of the story remained buried beneath the ice of history. What makes this tale especially remarkable is that technology eventually allowed us to approach the mystery more closely. Modern archaeologists began searching with sonar, underwater robots, seafloor mapping systems, tools Franklin himself could never have imagined. And then something extraordinary happened. In 2014, HMS Erebus was discovered on the floor of the Arctic Ocean. 2 years later, HMS Terror was found as well. After nearly a century and a half of disappearance, they were still there, as though time had fallen asleep around them. The first images from the wrecks astonished many observers. The cabins, the equipment, the wooden structures, all preserved with remarkable clarity by the frigid waters. The Arctic had accomplished something few places on Earth can achieve. It preserved history, not perfectly, not completely, but enough for voices from the past to still be heard. That is why many historians describe the Arctic as a natural time machine. Elsewhere, time usually destroys. Rain, wind, sunlight, bacteria. Life continuously recycles everything. But in the polar regions, the cold slows nearly all processes. Things that should have disappeared sometimes remain. Things that should have been forgotten are sometimes preserved. There is something deeply moving about that idea. That history is never truly lost. It is simply waiting to be found. Much like memory itself, Jung once wrote, "The word happiness would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness." Perhaps the same is true of memory. If everything were remembered perfectly, memory would lose much of its value. It is the things that are lost, the empty spaces, the mysteries, that compel us to keep searching, to keep asking questions, to keep telling stories. That is why the Franklin expedition continues to fascinate us today. Not simply because it was a maritime disaster, but because it reflects something profound within human nature, the desire to explore, the desire to push beyond limits, the desire to step into places no one has ever known. Yet at the same time, it is also a lesson in humility, for nature does not always bend to human wishes. There are places where we remain only small visitors, and the Arctic is one of them. When we look back at ships such as the Bichimo, the Resolute, the Erebus, and the Terror, we begin to realize that Arctic ghost ships are different from ghost ships elsewhere. They do not merely tell stories of disappearance. They tell stories about time, about the way time can preserve rather than destroy, about how history can sleep beneath the ice for centuries, and about how human beings never stop searching for what has been lost. Perhaps that is our own journey as well. Deep within the soul, each of us carries buried memories, unanswered questions, unexplored parts of ourselves. Jung called this the journey into the unconscious, an expedition not unlike entering the Arctic itself, filled with fog, filled with mystery, filled with the unknown, yet also containing treasures that only patience can uncover. And as the Arctic night slowly closes around those ships sleeping beneath the ice, we may carry one gentle thought with us before continuing our voyage. That some stories never truly disappear, that some memories never die, that some mysteries endure long enough to become part of humanity itself. Yet not every ghost ship rests beneath Arctic ice. Many other mysteries emerged in warmer seas. Ships discovered with food still in the galley, desks left untouched, machinery still running, and questions even stranger than before. That will be the story of our next chapter. Other famous disappearances in the history of ghost ships. Other famous disappearances. If stories such as Mary Celeste or the Franklin expedition belong to an era when the sea was still filled with blank spaces on the map, then perhaps the most surprising thing is that mysterious disappearances continue to occur even in the modern age. In a way, this makes ghost ship stories even more thought-provoking, because they remind us that technology does not eliminate mystery. It simply changes the shape of mystery. Today, we have radar, satellites, global positioning systems, nearly constant radio communication, yet sometimes, amid all these technologies, a ship still disappears from its own story, not by sinking beneath the waves, but by leaving behind a void where answers ought to exist. One of the most famous examples is the Carroll A. Deering. In 1921, this 5-masted schooner was discovered grounded near the coast of North Carolina. At first glance, it appeared to be little more than a maritime accident. But when rescuers boarded the vessel, they realized something was wrong. There was no crew, no captain, no one at all. The ship was completely deserted, yet many signs suggested that life aboard had continued normally not long before. Personal belongings remained. Food was still present in the galley. The familiar traces of daily maritime life were everywhere. Only the people had vanished. The strange thing is that no one knows exactly what happened. Theories emerged quickly. Mutiny, pirates, storms, accidents, conspiracies. Yet none of them fully explained the story. And as so often happens, when answers are absent, legends begin to appear. What makes the Carroll A. Deering memorable is not that it was the largest disappearance. It is that it created the same feeling so many ghost ships create. The feeling that life was here only moments ago and is now gone. A feeling like entering a room someone left just minutes earlier. No sound, no movement, yet traces of presence remain. Jung observed that human beings respond powerfully to absences shaped like presence. We easily accept a place that has never been occupied, but we struggle to accept a place, once full of life, that suddenly becomes empty, because the mind always wants to complete the story, always wants to know what happened next. And when no answer is available, imagination begins its work. Several decades after the Carroll A. Deering, another mystery emerged in the Pacific, the Joy Eater. In 1955, this vessel was discovered in a condition that suggested it was on the verge of sinking. Yet what made the case remarkable was that the Joy Eater had been designed to be nearly impossible to sink completely. It remained afloat, suspended upon the sea, as though waiting to be found. But the 25 people aboard had disappeared. Not a single one was ever located. No definitive explanation emerged. What is fascinating is that the Joy Eater's very reputation for being unsinkable only deepened the mystery. If the ship remained afloat, why did everyone abandon it? If they left, where did they go? If an accident occurred, why were there so few traces? These questions continue to be asked even today, perhaps because they touch one of humanity's oldest anxieties. Not the fear of death, but the fear of uncertainty. The fear of not knowing what happened, of not knowing how the story ends. Jung once wrote, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life." Here, the word meaningless reaches beyond philosophy. It also describes the discomfort of an incomplete narrative, a missing chain of cause and effect, an absent explanation, a structure that can no longer be understood. When those things disappear, unease takes their place. And that is why ghost ships continue to haunt the human imagination, because they are stories without endings, books missing their final chapter, songs lacking their last note, questions never fully answered. And perhaps that is exactly why they survive far longer than stories that have been neatly explained. For mystery possesses a remarkable ability. It continues living within the minds of people who never witnessed it. It passes from one generation to the next, not as an event, but as a symbol, a reminder that the world remains larger than our understanding, and that sometimes the most memorable things in history are not what we know, but what we still do not know. If the Carol A. Deering and the Joyita belong to the age of sailing ships and long voyages, then the cases that emerge during the 21st century carry a different feeling, perhaps an even stranger one, because they occurred in the modern world, a world filled with satellites, navigation systems, communication networks, a world in which we often believe there is no longer room for old-fashioned mysteries. Yet the sea seems never to have agreed with that belief. In 2007, a small yacht named Kaz 2 was discovered off the coast of Australia. When rescuers approached, they found no signs of panic. The vessel remained afloat. The engine was still running. A laptop computer remained open. The GPS system was still active. A meal had been prepared. Everything suggested that the people aboard had only just stood up and walked away. Yet the 3 men on board had vanished. No one knows where they went. No one knows exactly what happened. What makes the case remarkable is how brief the distance appears between life and disappearance. That is the source of its psychological power, not because there are too few traces, but because there are so many traces of ordinary life. A computer still operating, a meal left unfinished, a functioning vessel. Together, they create the sensation that time itself has been interrupted, as though someone suddenly pressed pause in the middle of an unfolding story. Jung observed that the unconscious is especially sensitive to unfinished things, circles left open, stories without conclusions. Such images return again and again because the mind seeks completion. Kaz 2 is a perfect example, not because it is overwhelmingly mysterious, but because it feels overwhelmingly unfinished. Then came 2008. A fishing vessel named Tai Ching 21 was discovered burning in the Pacific Ocean. Fire had consumed much of its structure. Black smoke drifted across the sea. Yet what made the incident famous was not the blaze itself. It was the absence. No one remained aboard. Not a single crew member. No complete explanation. The ship resembled a scene from a dream. A smoldering mass of steel floating in an endless ocean. No witnesses, no storyteller, only questions. When we hear stories like these, it is easy to think of the supernatural. Yet what makes them fascinating is that reality is often more complex. The ocean can create circumstances that make human decisions appear baffling from the outside. An emergency decision, an unexpected failure, a chain of events unfolding in only a few minutes. Such things can transform an ordinary situation into a mystery lasting decades. Perhaps what draws us to ghost ships is not that they prove the existence of the supernatural, but that they remind us of the limits of knowledge, of all the things that happened with no one left behind to tell the story. Another case carries an even darker tone. High Aim 6. Unlike many ghost ships, the mystery surrounding High Aim 6 does not arise solely from disappearance. It arises from human nature itself. Later investigations revealed elements involving murder, conflict, and mutiny. If the Flying Dutchman reflects humanity's fear of nature, then High Aim 6 reflects what Jung called the shadow, the hidden side of the human psyche, the part we often prefer not to see. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This was one of the central ideas of his psychology. Mysteries do not exist only upon the sea. They also exist within human beings. Sometimes the most frightening stories do not come from storms, but from silent conflicts within the soul itself. And then there is the Jianseng, a case that is strange in an entirely different way. In 2006, the vessel was discovered drifting off the coast of Australia. No crew, no obvious cargo. No complete verified records. No one knew with certainty who owned it. No one knew exactly where it had come from. No one knew where it was headed. Imagine that for a moment. A massive ship bearing all the traces of maritime activity, yet possessing almost no identity, no clear story, no claimant, no narrator. The Gienseng feels like a figure emerging from a memory whose name has been erased, a shadow of history, a question floating upon the water. Perhaps this is where we begin to recognize the common thread running through all the stories in this chapter. Carol A. Deering, Joyita, Kaz 2, Tai Ching 21, Hyeaim 6, Gienseng. They differ in era, in location, in circumstance, yet they all share one thing: the absence of a complete ending. And it is that absence that allows them to survive within collective memory. Jung called the shared reservoir of humanity's symbols and images the collective unconscious. Ghost ship stories live within that realm, not only because they are historical events, but because they have become symbols. Symbols of disappearance, symbols of the unknown, symbols of questions without perfect answers. Perhaps that is why, even after many years and many generations, people continue telling these stories, not in search of ghosts, but in search of something deeper, the realization that life does not always conclude with clear explanations, that some chapters remain missing. Some pages are torn from the book, some stories leave behind only fragile traces, and it is precisely those empty spaces that sometimes make them immortal. But if the cases we have explored still rest, at least in part, upon historical evidence, then in the next chapter, we will enter a darker territory within maritime imagination, a place where stories become stranger, where the boundary between history and legend nearly disappears, where tales emerge of corpses supposedly seated at their desks, mysterious distress signals, and ships that may never have existed in the way they were described. This is the world of the darkest legends in the history of ghost ships, the darkest legends of the sea. There is a curious moment in every ghost ship story, the moment when history ends and legend begins. At first, most stories are remarkably simple. A ship disappears, an accident occurs, a voyage remains unfinished, a crew never returns home. But over time, as witnesses pass away, as records are lost, and as memory is worn away by the years, something else begins to appear: imagination. Human beings do not like empty spaces. We do not like unanswered questions. We do not like stories without endings. And so, when facts become blurred, legends often step forward to fill the gaps. It is within that realm, where truth and imagination mingle like fog upon the sea, that the darkest maritime legends are born. One of them is the story of the Octavius. If you have ever explored classic maritime folklore, you have likely encountered this name. According to the legend, the Octavius was an 18th century merchant ship. The vessel supposedly attempted to navigate the Northwest Passage, one of the most dangerous regions on Earth. Then it vanished. Years later, a whaling ship allegedly discovered the Octavius drifting among the Arctic ice. When sailors boarded her, they were said to witness a scene they would never forget. Everyone aboard had frozen to death, but the strangest sight awaited inside the captain's cabin. The captain still sat at his desk. A pen remained in his hand, as though he had been writing the final line of his logbook, as though time itself had stopped in that very moment. It is an image so powerful that it feels almost perfectly designed for a ghost story. Too perfect. And for that reason, many historians question its authenticity. To this day, no reliable historical evidence confirms that the Octavius existed in the manner the legend describes. Most likely, it is a maritime tale, embroidered across generations. Yet that does not diminish its fascination. Quite the opposite. It forces us to ask another question. Why do human beings create stories like this? Carl Jung believed myths are not merely false stories, they are symbols. images created by the collective unconscious to express deep fears and desires. When we look at the frozen captain seated at his desk, we do not merely see a man, we see something universal, the obsession with pursuing a goal to the very end, the fear of becoming trapped in time, the fear of never returning home. In Jungian psychology, there is a concept known as the archetype, images that appear repeatedly across cultures. And among the oldest of these is the lost wanderer, the traveler who loses his way. The Octavius touches that archetype, a lonely ship, an endless voyage, a captain frozen between ambition and destiny. Perhaps that is why the story survives despite the lack of evidence, because it conveys a symbolic truth rather than a historical one. But if the Octavius is the legend of ice, then the Valencia is the legend of tragedy. In 1906, the steamship Valencia was wrecked off the western coast of Canada. This disaster was real, one of the most serious maritime accidents in the region's history. Many lives were lost. Many families were shattered. Yet what transformed the Valencia from history into legend was not the wreck itself, but the stories that followed. For years afterward, sailors reported seeing phantom lifeboats, small boats drifting through the fog. No occupants, no sound, only appearing and disappearing in silence. Some tales even described skeletal figures aboard them. No one knows exactly how much truth these accounts contain. No one knows how much belongs to memory and how much to imagination. Yet it is striking that most maritime ghost stories emerge after genuine tragedies, as though unresolved grief continues living within collective memory. Jung once wrote, "The dead are not absent, they are only invisible." Though often understood symbolically, the thought feels especially fitting here. The people lost aboard the Valencia are no longer physically present, yet they continue to exist within memory, within stories, within images passed from generation to generation. Perhaps many ghosts at sea are created not by spirits, but by remembrance, by sorrow, by humanity's desire to keep hold of what has been lost. And then we arrive at one of the most famous stories in all of ghost ship lore, a story in which a few lines of radio communication became enough to create a legend. The Orang Medan, the ship of the final signal, the ship of messages from the darkness, and perhaps the most controversial mystery ever associated with the sea. If the Octavius is a story of loneliness frozen in time, and the Valencia a story of memory refusing to fade, then the Orang Medan is something else entirely, a tale standing at the border between history, legend, and nightmare. To this day, merely hearing the name evokes a difficult feeling, not exactly fear, but an ancient unease, like staring into a dark room and realizing you do not know what waits inside. According to the most common version of the story, sometime in the late 1940s, ships passing through the Strait of Malacca allegedly received a strange distress signal. The first message was brief, broken, as though transmitted by someone in panic. It reportedly read, "All officers, including captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge." Then came another message, shorter, more famous, and more chilling, "I die." These were said to be the final words transmitted from the vessel known as the Orang Medan. Soon afterward, a rescue ship allegedly reached the location. What they supposedly discovered became the foundation of one of the sea's most enduring legends. According to the story, the entire crew was dead. There were no obvious injuries, no signs of struggle, no blood, no major wounds, yet every face carried the same expression, eyes wide open, features frozen in terror, as though they had witnessed something beyond the limits of human understanding. Even the ship's dog was said to have died in the same posture. It is a deeply cinematic image, a haunting one, and also a highly suspicious one, because the story grows stranger still. According to the legend, as rescuers prepared to tow the vessel to shore, smoke began rising from the cargo hold. The temperature aboard increased rapidly. Then suddenly, an explosion. The Orang Medan sank beneath the sea, taking all evidence with it. taking all answers with it, taking every secret into the depths. If this were a novel, we might say the author had crafted a perfect ending. A final distress call, a ship filled with corpses, an explosion that erased every trace. No witnesses, no evidence, no possibility of verification. And perhaps because it seems almost too perfect, researchers became suspicious. When historians attempted to trace ship registries, insurance records, and maritime documents, they encountered a problem. The Orang Medan almost does not exist. No definitive registry, no fully authenticated records. No independent evidence strong enough to confirm the vessel existed exactly as described. This has led many scholars to conclude that the entire story may be little more than a maritime urban legend, a tale amplified through newspapers, a myth assembled from fragments of unrelated stories, or perhaps a creation of collective imagination itself. Yet the legend survives, because its value does not depend on whether it is literally true. Its value lies in what it reveals about humanity. Carl Jung spent years studying recurring images in dreams, myths, and legends. He discovered that the stories that endure the longest are rarely the most accurate. They are the stories that touch our deepest fears, our deepest symbols, the oldest layers of the unconscious. The Orang Medan is precisely such a story, for behind the mysterious corpses and final distress call lies a profoundly ancient fear, the fear of the unknown. Human beings can face many dangers: storms, war, hunger, disease. Yet what unsettles us most are often the things we cannot name, cannot see, cannot explain. Jung once wrote, "Fear is a natural reaction to moving closer to the truth." That observation can be understood in many ways, but within ghost ship legends it carries a special meaning. Sometimes what frightens us is not the answer, but the empty space where the answer should be. It is that space that activates imagination and prompts the unconscious to fill what is missing. That is why nearly every culture creates similar stories: ghost ships, lost cities, mysterious lands, signals from nowhere. Because human beings constantly tell stories in an effort to make the unknown understandable. Yet sometimes the story survives longer than the truth itself. And that is precisely what happened with the Orang Medan. When we look back at the Octavius, the Valencia, and the Orang Medan, we begin to realize that the darkest legends are not truly about ghosts. They are about the human mind, about the way we confront loss, confront uncertainty, confront death, and above all, confront questions that can never be fully answered. From Jung's perspective, the sea has long served as a symbol of the unconscious, deep, vast, unpredictable, filled with countless undiscovered things. The ghost ships of legend resemble thoughts drifting upon the surface of that ocean. They appear, disappear, leave traces behind, then sink into darkness, yet never completely vanish. For each time they are retold, they live once more. Perhaps that is why, after centuries, these stories continue to captivate us. Not because we seek the supernatural, but because we seek to understand ourselves, to understand why the unknown is so compelling, to understand why unanswered mysteries survive longer than many confirmed facts. And as the fog of legend slowly begins to lift, a new question emerges. Are these stories truly supernatural? Or have natural explanations always existed behind ghost ships, phantom silhouettes on the horizon, and tales repeated through generations? Can science illuminate what mythology has concealed? That will be the next stage of our journey. A journey not into the realm of ghosts, but into the realm of light, physics, meteorology, and the quiet laws of nature. A journey into the science behind ghost ships. The science behind ghost ships. After journeying through stories such as the Flying Dutchman, the Octavius, the Valencia, and the Orang Medan, perhaps we begin to notice something fascinating. Not every mystery requires ghosts. Not every strange event needs a curse. And not every ghost ship is truly a ghost ship. Sometimes, the most mysterious thing of all is nature itself. For nature possesses a remarkable ability. It can create sights so beautiful they seem impossible, phenomena so unusual they feel like magic, and illusions so powerful that even the most experienced sailors may begin to doubt their own eyes. Perhaps nowhere is this more evident than upon the open sea. The ocean has always been a vast stage of light, of fog, of water, of air, and when these elements combine in unusual ways, they create experiences that blur the line between reality and imagination. One of the most famous of these phenomena bears a beautiful name, Fata Morgana. It sounds like the name of a sorceress from an ancient legend, and indeed, the name does come from old European folklore. But Fata Morgana is not magic, it is physics. A form of atmospheric refraction that occurs when layers of air at different temperatures stack upon one another. It sounds simple enough, yet the results can be astonishing. Imagine yourself standing on the deck of a ship on a cold morning. Far away lies the horizon. The sea is calm. The air is still. Then suddenly, you see a ship, but the ship is not on the water. It is floating in the sky, as though it has escaped gravity itself. For centuries, sights like these convinced people that they had witnessed ghost ships. Today, however, science tells us that light does not always travel in straight lines. As it passes through layers of air with different temperatures, it bends, and that bending can create images so distorted that they seem unreal. A ship may appear far above its actual position. An island may stretch upward into towering castles. An ordinary object may transform into something surreal. Sometimes the image even appears upside down, a ship suspended in the heavens, a city hanging in the air, a horizon stretched into the shape of a dream. If you were a sailor living in the 17th, 18th, or 19th century, what would you think upon seeing such a sight? Perhaps exactly what the storytellers of the Flying Dutchman believed. For when scientific explanations are absent, legends often become the most reasonable answer available. Carl Jung observed that the human mind does not merely see the world, it interprets the world. We do not passively receive reality. We constantly assign meaning to it. A cloud becomes a face. A dream becomes a prophecy. An illusion becomes a ghost ship. This does not happen because people are foolish. It happens because the mind is always searching for stories, always searching for meaning, always searching for a structure it can understand. Jung once wrote, "Man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health." Perhaps the mysteries of the sea serve a similar purpose. They encourage us to ask questions, to observe more carefully, to expand our understanding. The fascinating thing is that even when science explains a phenomenon like Fata Morgana, its beauty does not diminish. If anything, it becomes even more wondrous, because now we know that nature itself is capable of performing extraordinary illusions without any help from the supernatural. And this leads us toward a deeper realization. Sometimes the real world is stranger than the myths we create about it. Yet Fata Morgana is only one part of the story. For alongside the artistry of light, the ocean employs other performers: fog, moonlight, elements that seem entirely ordinary, yet possess the power to transform normal ships into spectral figures drifting across the sea. And from these quiet performances, countless maritime legends were born. If Fata Morgana is the artist of light, then fog is the artist of concealment. Throughout maritime history, perhaps no natural phenomenon has contributed more ghost ships to human imagination than fog. It is not loud, not violent. It does not carry the destructive force of a storm. Fog simply arrives, quietly, silently. Yet it is precisely this silence that makes it so powerful, because fog does not hide the world completely. It hides only part of it, and what appears incomplete is often what most strongly awakens the imagination. Imagine a 19th century sailing vessel crossing the North Atlantic at night. The sea is calm, The air is cold. A dense white mist blankets the water. Far away, a dark shape emerges, then vanishes, then appears again. Faint masts, unclear sails. Something that seems to approach, yet does not entirely belong to the world of the living. For sailors of the past, such experiences must have been unforgettable. Today we understand that the human eye is not always reliable, especially in low light, especially across great distances, especially when the brain is forced to complete missing information. But for centuries, people lacked those explanations. They only had the experience itself, and experiences often become legends. Jung noted that human beings do not see the world as it is. We see it through the symbols and images created by the mind. Between what the eye sees and what the mind understands lies a gap, and within that gap, imagination appears. Sometimes imagination becomes the most powerful storyteller of all. The same is true of moonlight. Sunlight offers clarity. Moonlight offers ambiguity. Under the moon, distances become difficult to judge. Sizes become uncertain. Everything acquires an unusual beauty. A perfectly ordinary ship in daylight can become a silver phantom beneath the moon. Its masts resemble giant arms. Its sails become drifting curtains, and the sea reflects everything like a trembling mirror. It is not difficult to understand why so many stories of the Flying Dutchman are told at night, nor why strange silhouettes upon the horizon were often interpreted as omens. For in those moments, nature itself became a master storyteller. Yet science does not only explain what sailors saw, it also explains what abandoned ships actually did after being left behind. In earlier chapters, we encountered ghost ships that wandered the oceans for months, sometimes years. At first glance, that seems extraordinary. But when we examine the global system of ocean currents, the mystery becomes easier to understand. The ocean is not a still body of water. It is a constantly moving system. Vast currents transport heat around the planet, connecting oceans, connecting continents, and sometimes carrying abandoned ships along with them. A ship may lose its crew, yet it does not necessarily lose its ability to float, or its ability to move. Instead, it becomes part of a larger flow, like a leaf carried by a river, like an object swept along by the breathing rhythms of the earth. This explains why many ghost ships are discovered thousands of kilometers from where they were last seen, not because of supernatural forces, but because of natural laws, powerful laws that sometimes make us forget we live upon a planet that is constantly in motion. Jung once wrote, "In all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder a secret order. Nowhere is this more evident than upon the sea." At first glance, waves appear chaotic. Winds appear chaotic, but beneath it all lie patterns that endure for centuries. Invisible currents that shape the journeys of everything floating upon the water. And then there is another force, sea ice. If ocean currents are the travelers of history, then sea ice is history's archivist. In the Arctic, extreme cold has the ability to slow time in a very particular sense. Not physical time, but the time of decay. Ships trapped within ice can be preserved for decades, sometimes even centuries. Objects that should have rotted away remain intact. Traces that should have vanished are preserved. This is what makes stories such as the Bichimo, the Erebus, and the Terror so remarkable. The Arctic does not tell history through words. It tells history through preservation, through layers of frozen silence, through the patience of nature itself. Perhaps the most beautiful gift science offers is not the destruction of myths, but the ability to see the deeper beauty hidden behind them. Once, people saw a ship floating in the sky and imagined demons. Today we see the same phenomenon and understand Fata Morgana, yet the wonder remains. Once, people saw a vessel emerge from the fog and imagined a curse. Today, we understand light, moisture, and perception, yet the beauty has not vanished. Perhaps this is what Jung meant when he repeatedly suggested that symbols do not disappear when explained. They simply become deeper. For the purpose of understanding is not to remove wonder, it is to discover wonder at a deeper level. And when we look back across the history of ghost ships, we begin to realize something important. Ghost ships do not exist because people were ignorant. They exist because human beings have always tried to tell stories about things they did not yet understand. That is how we create meaning. That is how we transform scattered experiences into a world that feels ordered. Yet there is another force that has shaped ghost ship legends just as powerfully. Not the sea, not the fog, not the moonlight, but storytellers, journalists, newspapers, novels, films, and that is where our next journey begins. An exploration of how the media transformed ordinary ships into immortal legends of the sea, the objects that tell stories. After all the missing ships, after the legends, after the final distress signals, after mysteries that have endured for centuries, perhaps the most moving things archaeologists and historians discover aboard ghost ships are not the ships themselves, but the objects. Small things, ordinary things, things so commonplace that their owners probably never imagined they would one day become witnesses to history. A pair of shoes, a watch, a book, an unfinished letter, a drinking cup, a sealed tin of food. These objects do not know how to tell stories, yet somehow they do. Perhaps because every object carries traces of a human life, not in a physical sense, but in a psychological one. When we see an empty chair, we often think of the person who once sat there. When we see a worn pair of shoes, we imagine the person who once wore them. When we see an unfinished letter, our minds almost automatically picture the hand that once held the pen. Carl Jung was deeply interested in symbols like these. He realized that the human mind possesses a remarkable ability. We do not merely see objects, we see the stories inside them. A small artifact can open the door to an entire world of memory. A silent object can awaken some of our deepest emotions. And aboard ghost ships, this phenomenon appears with extraordinary power, for these objects are often found exactly as they were left, not packed away, not reorganized, not completed. They are like moments frozen in the flow of time. Among the most moving artifacts are unfinished letters. Imagine a sailor sitting in his cabin on a quiet evening. The ship glides across the ocean. Outside are the sounds of waves, of wind, of timbers gently creaking. He unfolds a sheet of paper, dips his pen into ink, and begins writing to his family, perhaps to a wife waiting at home, perhaps to aging parents, perhaps to children he misses dearly. He writes about the voyage, about the weather, about the ordinary details of daily life. And then, for some reason, the letter stops. A sentence unfinished, a paragraph abandoned, a farewell never completed. That is all that remains. What touches our hearts about these letters is not their content, it is their incompleteness, for they remind us that life rarely ends with perfect punctuation. Many stories end in the middle. Many conversations end in the middle. Many dreams end in the middle. And this is something Jung returned to again and again in his study of the human psyche. He believed that much of our suffering comes not from what is finished, but from what remains unfinished. Circles left open, words left unsaid, goodbyes that never had the chance to happen. Perhaps that is why an unfinished letter can be more moving than an entire completed book. It leaves a space, and our imagination quietly steps inside. Another artifact often discovered aboard abandoned ships is the marine chronometer. At first glance, it appears to be merely a tool, a device for measuring time. But when found on a ship deserted for decades, it acquires a different meaning. It becomes a symbol of time itself. The strange thing is that many such clocks are discovered frozen at a single moment, their hands no longer moving. Yet it is precisely that stillness that makes them powerful. For the clock's time has stopped, while the world's time has continued. Winters have passed. Generations have changed. Children have become grandparents, yet the clock still points to the same moment. as though it is holding onto a fragment of the past that refuses to disappear. Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When we look at an old clock aboard a ghost ship, we are not really looking at time, we are looking at memory. And memory obeys very different laws. In the human mind, a single moment can last an entire lifetime. An ordinary day may be forgotten, yet one special afternoon may live forever. The clock is much the same. It no longer measures time, it measures remembrance. It measures the distance between the present and the past. And then there are the books. Books discovered aboard ghost ships carry a feeling unlike any other artifact. For books are evidence of an inner life. A hammer tells us about work. A pair of shoes tells us about a journey. But a book tells us about thought, about what someone wished to understand, to learn, to dream about. Sometimes, simply seeing the title of a book left upon a shelf is enough for historians to feel as though they are meeting someone long gone, not through a face, not through a voice, but through curiosity, through the things that person wanted to read before falling asleep beneath the vastness of the sea. And perhaps that is the greatest magic of artifacts. They do not bring the dead back to life, yet they allow them to become present once more within our imagination, like distant echoes from a vanished world, like small lamps still glowing through the fog of history. Why ghost ships fascinate humanity, after all the journeys we have taken together, after Mary Celeste, after the Flying Dutchman, after the ships trapped within the ice of the Arctic, after the distress signals that vanished into the vastness of the sea, after the objects left exactly where they once rested, as though time itself had suddenly stopped. Perhaps it is finally time to ask the most important question of all. Not what happened to those ships, but what is happening within us. Why do ghost ships fascinate human beings so deeply? Why, after hundreds of years, do we continue to tell their stories? Why do they continue to appear in books, in films, in dreams, and in the imaginations of millions of people around the world? From a historical perspective, the answer may seem simple, because they are unsolved mysteries. Yet if that were the whole explanation, ghost ships would not have endured for so long. History contains countless mysteries, countless disappearances, countless events that remain unexplained. But not all of them become legends. Not all of them live on within our collective memory. Ghost ships are different, because every ghost ship contains two stories. The first is the story of history. It is the story pursued by investigators. Specific dates, specific coordinates, logbooks, witness statements, physical evidence, the final entries, written into a ship's journal. It is the world of facts, of records, of things that can be verified. Within that world, Mary Celeste was a vessel discovered in 1872. Carol A. Deering ran aground in 1921. Joy Eater vanished in 1955. Kaz II was found in 2007. Everything has a time, a place, a file, a witness. But then there is a second story. A story that does not appear in investigation reports, not in maritime logs, not in legal documents. It is the story of imagination, the story of fear, the story of unanswered questions and empty spaces. And strangely enough, it is this second story that survives the longest. Carl Jung spent much of his life studying things like this. He observed that human beings do not live entirely in the world of events. We live in the world of meaning. An event only becomes truly powerful when it transforms into a symbol, when it touches something deeper within the human soul. Ghost ships do exactly that, for they awaken one of humanity's oldest experiences, the experience of confronting the unknown. Since ancient times, human beings have feared what lies beyond sight. Dark forests, deep caves, endless oceans, places untouched by light, places where maps come to an end. For centuries, the sea has served as a perfect symbol of the unconscious, and nowhere is this more fitting than in Jungian psychology. Throughout his work, Jung often described the unconscious as a vast ocean, a boundless sea lying beneath the tiny island of conscious awareness. Consciousness is the island, but the unconscious is the ocean surrounding it, and ghost ships seem to emerge directly from those waters, drifting out from places no one fully understands, carrying questions without answers, carrying gaps that reason alone cannot fill. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Perhaps this is one of the deepest reasons ghost ships continue to captivate us, because every ghost ship is a symbol of what remains unknown, what remains undiscovered, what still waits in darkness. And human beings have always been drawn toward such things, not because we enjoy fear, but because we long to understand, to see, to bring light into places where darkness remains. Yet there is an interesting paradox. We often say that we want answers, and yet when a mystery is completely solved, it frequently loses part of its power. Think about it. If tomorrow every detail of the Mary Celeste were fully explained, if some miraculous recording appeared and revealed exactly what happened, would the story still hold the same fascination? Perhaps not, because what we truly love is not only the answer, it is the space before the answer. The space where imagination is free to wander, the space where questions remain open, the space where legends are born. And it is there that history meets psychology, where facts meet symbols, where ghost ships become something greater than ships. They become mirrors, reflecting the deepest corners of the human soul. Perhaps the strangest thing about ghost ships is that their mystery does not truly reside in the sea, not in disappearances, not in storms, but within the human mind itself. For even after centuries, we continue telling these stories. We read about them, make films about them, write books about them, dream about them, and sometimes, on quiet nights, we still imagine a solitary vessel emerging through the mist upon the horizon. Why? Perhaps because ghost ships are not merely ghost ships, they are symbols. And as Carl Jung repeatedly emphasized, symbols are the natural language of the unconscious. When an image survives across cultures, across centuries, across generations, it ceases to be merely a story. It becomes an archetype, an ancient pattern living within the deepest layers of the human psyche. Within ghost ships, we can recognize a particularly powerful archetype, the lost wanderer. Since ancient times, humanity has told stories about those who set sail and never returned. Odysseus, drifting across unknown seas, expeditions vanishing into unexplored lands, sailors disappearing into fog, never to be seen again. Such stories appear throughout the world because deep within, they reflect a psychological truth. Every human being is on a voyage, a journey through life, a journey toward the self, a journey across waters no map can fully reveal. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who we truly are, a voyage that does not unfold upon the ocean, but within the soul itself. And just like real voyages at sea, it is filled with uncertainty. There are waters filled with light. There are waters filled with darkness. There are storms. There are calm seas. There are discoveries. And there are things forever lost. Perhaps that is why the image of an abandoned ship touches us so deeply, because it is not merely telling the story of a vessel, it is telling the story of forgotten parts of ourselves, dreams left unfinished, plans abandoned, conversations that never reached their conclusion, roads we never chose to walk. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Ghost ships often appear in darkness, in fog, in places where visibility is limited, perhaps because they represent that very darkness. Not evil, but the unknown, the unexplored, the parts of reality that remain beyond awareness. In Jungian psychology, darkness is not something to destroy. It is something to understand. And perhaps mysteries are much the same. Their value does not always lie in being completely solved. Sometimes their value lies in their ability to make us wonder, to make us question, to remind us that the world is far larger than what we know. That may also explain why myths often outlive facts. Facts answer questions. Myths keep questions alive. An investigation report may end after a few pages, but a legend can survive for centuries. Not because it is more accurate, but because it touches something deeper, something Jung called the collective unconscious, the shared reservoir of symbols carried by all humanity. Within that realm, ghost ships are no longer maritime events. They become symbols of the unknown, symbols of the journey, symbols of loss, symbols of unanswered questions. And perhaps that is why the sea never completely erases its traces. Instead, it leaves just enough behind: a journal, a watch, a pair of shoes, a final signal, a small empty space. Not enough to reveal the whole truth, but enough to keep us searching, keep us imagining, keep us telling the story. And perhaps, if we reflect a little more deeply, we realize that human life itself is much the same. None of us knows everything. None of us sees the entire picture. We live between certainty and mystery, between answers and questions, between light and shadow, between the known and the unknown, and it is within that space that meaning is born. Perhaps that is the greatest gift ghost ships leave behind. Not fear, not curses, not supernatural tales, but humility. The recognition that the world is always larger than our understanding, that history always contains unread pages, that the ocean always holds undiscovered waters, and that within every human soul there are oceans just as deep, oceans where memory, dreams, fear, and hope all coexist, oceans that may take an entire lifetime to explore. And when we look back upon our journey from Mary Celeste to the Flying Dutchman, from frozen Arctic wrecks to final distress signals echoing across the sea, we realize something important. The story was never truly about ghost ships. It was always about people, about our need for meaning, our curiosity, our imagination, our ability to transform scattered events into stories that accompany us across generations. Because in the end, what survives is not the ship, it is the story. And what survives within the story is not the mystery itself, but the deeply human desire to understand something larger than ourselves. That is why ghost ships continue to drift onward, not across the oceans, but through the imagination of humanity. And perhaps they will continue that voyage long after all of us have left our own harbors behind. And so, our journey tonight is slowly coming to an end. Together, we left the harbor of the present, sailed through the waters of history, past storms forgotten by time, boarded ships whose crews never returned, listened to final signals echoing across vast oceans, and explored stories that have lived for centuries within the human imagination. We met Mary Celeste, the Flying Dutchman, Bikimo, Joyita, and many others, each carrying a mystery, a question, an empty space, an unfinished story. Yet perhaps the most fascinating thing these ships revealed was not their secrets, but what they revealed about us. For in the end, ghost ships were never merely ships. They were mirrors, mirrors reflecting human curiosity, human fear, human hope, and humanity's enduring desire to find meaning in a world far larger than we can fully comprehend. Carl Jung spent his life exploring what lies beneath the surface of consciousness. He discovered that beneath everyday thought exists a vast inner ocean, an ocean of memory, symbols, dreams, and the unconscious. Perhaps that is why ghost ships continue to move us, because they resemble thoughts drifting up from the deepest waters of the soul. Unanswered questions, memories not entirely gone, mysteries carried quietly within every human life. But tonight, as our voyage gently reaches its conclusion, perhaps we do not need any more answers. We do not need to solve every mystery. We do not need to know exactly what happened aboard every ship, because sometimes peace comes not from knowing everything, but from accepting that some things remain unknown, like the ocean, like the night sky, like the human soul itself. There will always be deeper waters waiting to be explored, and that is perfectly okay. Now, as you listen to these final words, allow your shoulders to relax a little more. Allow your breathing to become slower, softer, gentler. Imagine yourself standing upon the deck of a quiet ship. No storm, no fog, nothing frightening at all. Only the gentle sound of waves against the hull, the soft whisper of night wind across the sea, and moonlight stretching a silver pathway across the water. Far away, the horizon melts into darkness. Everything is peaceful. Everything is resting. And you may rest too. The unfinished work can wait until tomorrow. The unanswered questions can wait until tomorrow. The worries, the pressures, the thoughts circling endlessly through your mind, let them drift away like distant waves beyond the horizon. There is no need to hold on to them, no need to control them, no need to solve them tonight. Tonight is for rest, because just as the sea needs calm waters between storms, the human soul needs moments of stillness in order to heal. And perhaps within that stillness, we find what we have been searching for all along, not through effort, but through quietness, not by moving faster, but by allowing ourselves to pause. If you have traveled with me through this entire journey from the mysteries of Mary Celeste to these final reflections on the human soul, then I am truly grateful. Thank you for your time. Thank you for exploring history in a slower way, a deeper way, and perhaps a more human way. If you enjoy stories like these, stories where history meets psychology, where science meets symbolism, where Carl Jung meets humanity's greatest mysteries, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every subscription helps us continue these journeys together. Journeys through history, through lost civilizations, through the mysteries of the mind, through stories that help us understand the world and understand ourselves. In future videos, we will meet again, perhaps in a vanished city, a world-changing invention, an unsolved mystery, or an ancient symbol sleeping quietly within humanity's collective unconscious. But for now, it is time to rest. Time to let the ghost ships continue their own voyages across the oceans of history, and for you to continue yours through the world of dreams. May you have a peaceful night, deep sleep, beautiful dreams, and a morning that feels just a little lighter than today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me. And as always, good night, and may calm seas carry your dreams safely into the dawn.